I'm Steph. I'm the head of the Scottish AI Alliance. The Scottish AI Alliance are the delivery body for Scotland's national AI strategy. The strategy was launched at the end of March 2021, and its vision was for Scotland to be a leader in trustworthy, ethical, and inclusive AI. And those three values are pretty much the lens through which we do everything at the Scottish AI Alliance. So we go out and talk to a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, a lot of people through events, workshops, etc., to talk to people about AI. And we approach it through a very, very balanced approach, because there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of binary views about AI out there that you have no doubt heard. You know, AI is going to kill us all, take our jobs, destroy the world, or AI is magic, it's the best thing since sliced bread. And the truth is, it's neither of those. The truth is very much in the middle. And one thing we're really keen on doing is making sure we help people navigate through the noise and the hype all around AI. And also trying to bring it back to for people to remember that we need to center the human, we need to center people. And obviously here at the gathering, I don't think I need to tell you that. I do go to different contexts where I'm like, yeah, we have to remember about people. When you talk about technology, you have to remember about people, because it's people that develop technology, like AI, it's people that make decisions to deploy it, and it's people it ultimately impacts. And some of you are working with some of the most vulnerable and marginalized communities already, and technologies like AI, if not adopted responsibly, will just exacerbate vulnerabilities and actually have severely negative impacts on those sections of society that you work with. So one thing I always say is, there are a lot of people that will challenge that. Oh, why are you talking about ethics and responsibility? It's all a bit boring, isn't it? Like, it's a bit doom and gloom. Why don't we talk about the joy, all the amazing things that AI can do? And that's where I have a problem, because why is talking about making technologies like AI benefit everyone, as opposed to just a small select few, why is that doom and gloom? Because surely we want to create technology that benefits as many people as possible and does not exclude people from participating in life, in society, in work, etc. So I'm very, very vocal about trying to change that narrative around ethics and responsibility in AI. Have you ever noticed, like, people like to call out responsible AI, ethical AI, safe AI? But to me, that's such a weird way of looking at it, because does that mean the default is unsafe AI, irresponsible AI, unethical AI? Because why are we calling out examples of good when good should be the default? Responsible should be the default. We should be calling out when people are using AI irresponsibly, unsafely, untrustworthily. But we have to remember, AI is just a tool, but it is a tool that exists in a complex socio-technical system. And so it has a lot of complications. And also, another thing we're big on is, when people think of AI right now, especially like, in these polls and stuff, people are thinking about ChatGPT, about large language models. That is not all there is in AI. AI has been around since the 1950s in many different forms. It is a set of technologies. The thing ChatGPT did, at the end of 2022 and early 2023 was, I guess, to a certain degree, it made what was previously invisible, visible. So to a certain extent, that's a good thing, because it's got people talking about it. But it has led to this mass kind of hysteria about what AI can do. And, hysteria around increasing efficiencies and productivity, etc. Last week, we supported a launch of a 3-year review by the Institute of Future Work on the future of work and well-being and the impacts of AI and automation on it. And one of the things one of the key headlines from that review was that AI and automation is going to increase inequalities in society. And that's a pretty damning headline. And also they said that we need to be careful when we talk about productivity, because are we really talking about productivity, or are we talking about the intensification of work? Because the normal story about AI is, it'll get rid of all the mundane tasks, all the boring tasks, all the repetitive tasks. But if you end up only ever doing the stuff that isn't mundane or repetitive or low-level work that people call it, you will be continuously working in a really intensive world that is not good for your well-being. AI is not magic. It is also not the solution to all your problems. No matter what a vendor tells you, it is not going to solve people problems, because ultimately at the core of a lot of problems organizations have, it's people. And if you don't solve the people problems, I know they're hard, people problems are hard, and a technological solution might seem like a really fancy, shiny way of fixing that people problem, but it won't, because it can't solve people problems. It might solve the symptoms of a people problem, but it will never solve the problem. And the next technology will roll around and you'll do that same thing. And just looking at that word cloud just now, it's so exemplary of the problems with AI, is that there's such a diverse views there. Scary is always up there. There are national surveys around AI. Scary, job loss, cheating, bias, etc. But hopeful. And it's about how do we balance that? How do we balance the hopeful potential of how AI can improve our lives, can improve the way we learn, we work, we live, without kind of excluding people who can't access it because they were born in the wrong postcode or in the wrong country or went to the wrong school. And that's a big, big problem with AI, because right now, a lot of the opportunities that are there are presented to those who already have privileges, already has access. And how do we ensure that the benefits from AI technologies can benefit everyone? The environmental impacts, I love that that was up there, because I think maybe 2 years ago when we last did this, or was it a year ago, that wouldn't have been up there. Because I think the conversations around how large language models, which is what ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, etc., are hugely bad for the environment. The water use, the power use, and once we get people to get their heads around the environmental impact, you have to then remember there's actually labor exploitation behind a lot of it. You see, when you have these models, when people talk about the concept of training models as if it's just a thing that magically happens. Training models involves lots of people annotating and labeling data. Excuse me. And these people tend to be from, I hate this term, but the global south, where they're are being paid $1 an hour. $1 a day, maybe, to annotate these things that then train these data sets. People don't think about the hidden labor behind the technology that they're given, because the narrative around AI, especially around Gen AI, is, look, this is how cool it is, this is the cool thing it can help you do, this is how it can make your life better. But as John was saying, how do we align it with our values? How do we align it with the values of your organization? About ethical supply chains, you have to think about ethical procurement of solutions. I know there's a lot of noise out there, and one of the things we're trying to do at the Scottish AI Alliance, we're 100% funded by the Scottish government, but we are not the Scottish government. So we provide free resources to help organizations adopt AI in an ethical, trustworthy, and inclusive way.
When ChatGPT dropped in November 2022, myself and my colleague we didn't think that's a great solution, now let's look for a problem. We thought, we've got a lot of problems within the charity sector, and I'm sure everybody in this room has. Demand for our services always exceeds our ability to meet them. And we thought, with generative AI, is there a way we could harness that power really to help with some of the pain points we've got in the service? And one of the areas that we identified was remote support. So the way our advisors get help, so they have a client comes in, the client asks the advisor a question, maybe the advisor's not sure. What they would do is drop into a chat and speak to one of their supervisors and say, I've got a client, could you give me some advice? Which was great, but what we found is, with the cost of living crisis, it's been very hard to recruit paid staff and recruit volunteers. So that means we've got a lot of trainees now at the moment, which meant these support spaces were overwhelmed with questions, because clients were coming in and these were trainee advisors, so they were asking more questions for our supervisors, and our supervisors were really struggling. And the impact on that was meaning that sometimes questions were getting missed, but ultimately it meant it was taking longer to get the answers to our clients. So we thought this could be a great place where we could inject into the main line, inject AI into an area that we've got a pain point there, but where we could obviously do that in a responsible, ethical way as well. So we developed, and I'll go through it, a solution that is now called Caddy, that we piloted locally within Greater Manchester, that was picked up by National Citizens Advice, and then since 2020, well, mostly 2024, we've been working with the Cabinet Office's Incubator for AI team and looking at how we can obviously make CADI more robust, how we can improve the accuracy, and how potentially CADI be used in different places outside the Citizens Advice Network. So what is CADI? So again, in terms of AI, it's a generative AI LLM-powered chatbot. One of the things that with advice is, I suppose most people here are aware of the danger of hallucinations. So when we're asking a client advice and we're using an LLM to go away and get answers, we can't have that hallucinating and coming back with answers that look very compelling but are completely wrong. So one of the things we do, we use a system called RAG, which is Retrieval Augmented Generation, which essentially is a fancy way of saying when the LLM goes away, it only looks at trusted websites. So at the moment, CADI only looks at the gov.uk website and the Citizens Advice public site. So when it's going for answers, it only looks at those sources. What it does then is, obviously the idea was it would speed up that process, help us do that, but also help build advisor confidence as well, because often trainees feel a bit of imposter syndrome. They don't like asking for help to human advisors, whereas using CADI, they could ask the chatbot to do it. And then obviously the ambition was it would reduce demand on the supervisors. One of the first things, and again, Steph kind of led on it really, before even a line of code was written, we sat down with our supervisors, our advisors, and said, this is an idea we've got, what do you think? And really reassuring them this was not an attempt to replace anybody. Our advisors, a key part of Citizens Advice, but a key part of the sector is that human-to-human connection. It's so important. So we kind of reiterate this is just a way to support you. We want this AI to augment the work, not to replace you. And that when we were developing CADI, it was definitely co-designed. So we're sat in the same room as advisors, getting feedback live. What we did to ensure that is, again, and I think it's really important in terms of when we're thinking about AI, I think it's really important that we as a sector have a voice in this transformational technology, because we will be looking at it through the lens of purpose and not through the lens of profit. I think we're a good example of that in terms of when we were doing it, when we sat down and started mapping out what the solution would be, we did a process called consequence scanning, which is essentially trying to map out everything that could go wrong if we use this solution and look at all the mitigations we could put in place to prevent that. We developed a AI policies. This is back in kind of 2023, so it's pretty much boilerplate policy, but that's constantly adapting and evolving, and in that it's got like kind of AI kind of procurement, AI kind of guardrails we'd put in place. We set up a governance board. What was interesting again was obviously everybody's on this learning journey, so a lot of our trustees, when we first started talking about this, they thought we were going to get robots in to replace advisors, so there was a lot of education. We're educating our own staff about what AI is and what it isn't. Again, getting advisors involved from the start. We had red lines very early on, and the first one was that clients would always speak to a human. So what we didn't want is, and again this would be the same for many people in this room, the clients that are approaching us are often very vulnerable, very distressed, sometimes very angry. The last thing we wanted was to insert or force an AI solution upon the client. One, that they might mistake that for a human, but also that might get misadvised, but also they get stuck in that chatbot loop of hell where, sorry, I didn't understand that. We didn't want any of them experiences, so we always wanted to make sure that the client spoke to a human. And a key bit that has been part of CADI, and I think the reason that the government were keen to adopt it was that it's got what is now called a human-in-the-loop process. So every answer that CADI gets and brings back, a supervisor validates that before it goes to an advisor. So that is, from an insurance compliance point of view, that means the answer was given by a human because the answer has been validated by a human advisor. So again, it's AI augmenting the process, not replacing people. And one of the other people we wanted to make sure that we had in the room, so obviously we had our advisors, our supervisors, our trustees, was our clients. And we thought, well, how do we get our clients into that conversation? And we were really lucky that within Manchester, Manchester City Council and Manchester Metropolitan University have done a scheme called the People's Panel for AI, which started as a roadshow where they go around across the city, putting on events for regular people to say this is what AI is, and then from that they got a self-selecting panel of people who wanted to be the voice of the residents of Manchester. And what the People's Panel does, it allows organisations or companies who are developing AI solutions to present their solution to the people's panel, where you can they act as a critical friend, where they can ask you questions maybe you've not thought of, sense check the processes you put in place, and just allow you to kind of second guess that you've done everything you could to ensure that AI solution is safe and it's going to be fit for purpose. This is just a kind of flow chart of how CADI works. Hopefully it makes sense. So again, if you start on the left there, the client always speaks to a human advisor, and then the advisor, say in this instance, they're not sure of the answer. What they'll do is ask CADI the question. So they'll, into the chat, they'll ask CADI, the AI chatbot, for the answer. CADI will go away. It will speak to gov.uk or AdvisorNet, which is the Citizens Advice expert advice section, or the public Citizens Advice site. It then will send that answer back to the supervisor, and that's a key stage, because what it doesn't do is send it straight back to the advisor, because then it avoids the temptation of the advisor just saying, that must be right, I'm going to give it to the client. It goes to the supervisor first, and only when the supervisor has validated it does it then go back to the advisor, and the advisor knows, well, this is right now because it's been authorized by a supervisor, and then we can give that information to the client. So what has been the impact of CADI? So last year, we tested CADI with 6 local offices across England and Wales of various different sizes, various different client groups, and tested how it worked. So the kind of baseline figures were that it was 50% quicker than waiting for a human advisor to respond. So that includes CADI going away, getting the answer, coming back, a human supervisor seeing the answer and validating it was still 50% quicker than a human supervisor waiting to answer. The accuracy of CADI was 80%, so 80% of all the answers it got were approved without the need for any amendments. Now 80% obviously is a big number, and we know some of that 20% falls into 2 buckets. One of it is the advice falls outside gov.uk or the Citizens Advice website, so that is where it's very specialist level advice. So that could be immigration, employment, housing, where it's quite in-depth advice. So we know we could improve that accuracy if we spoke to our colleagues and partners and got those information sources added into CADI. And the other one, again, goes back to this training. Some of it was around prompt engineering. So this was where an advisor would ask a very generic question to CADI. So CADI go away and come back with a huge answer, which meant the supervisor would have to go into it and interrogate and say, well, you need to go back to the client and follow out these different pieces of information in order for us to get a better answer. And the important one was the advisors. Their overwhelming response was positive. They all saw the benefits of this, how it would help them. So that's advisors and supervisors. So they definitely saw it as a way to support them and, again, not to replace them. So that was CADI.
So my research very much focused on racial justice and also racial inequalities and inequities in the context of AI that should be responsible by default. And also I use a lot of co-creation methods, so co-design and participatory research that involves people in the research process and also leading towards change. So I've done some publications, developed toolkits, and also been on several expert advisory roles in the Scottish Government. But all of that's united by a really strong interest I have around understanding and tackling issues of racial bias and racism that's found in AI. And as we know, some of these issues, racialization of people, systemic racism, institutional racism, are not issues that are new. But as also mentioned by Steph, some of these issues are then perpetuated and replicated, or sometimes go under disguise, when it's applied in the context of AI and data. And it's really important that the work that Shure is doing, for example, including people's panels, using governance boards that have human oversight and loop into validation, about amplifying the voice and expertise, particularly of racialized people when thinking about addressing racism and racial bias in innovation through co-design. 2 projects I'll talk about today, one called Protecting Minoritized Ethnic Communities Online, which is coming to an end in a month's time, but also a new project that's funded by the Responsible AI UK called the Participatory Harm, Auditing Workbenches and Methodologies. So we'll go into those. A little bit first, the context. Why we need responsible AI, why it needs to be responsible by default. Because there are some of the scholars that listed here, for example, Joy Bolamwini, one of her documentaries called Coded Bias, which is available on Netflix or on the British Film Institute, really was the starting point of where I think one of the starting points of where racial bias in AI, particularly facial recognition technology, really comes into the fore in the public discussions, but also in my own understanding of these issues. Also, other scholars such as Ruha Benjamin read Race After Technology. If you really pick one book out of this, I would really recommend that, and other scholars listed here too. And I've written about something about how harms has been exacerbated by the really rapid, accelerated digitization of public services, now echoed in the AI Opportunities Action Plan that's just announced by the UK Prime Minister last month. But also during the pandemic, for example, interactions and contact with GPs and access to healthcare services, but also with energy utilities, social security, such as access to benefits and universal credit, that has really, in the past few years, in the past 5 years in particular, and during the pandemic, that has all gone really quickly into digital by default without really understanding and recognizing what that means when, in terms of coming to replicating some existing issues, but also creating some new inequalities in this context. And research has found that people are increasingly being racialized in everyday use of AI and data. For example, through profiling, through clustering of people. Sometimes, for example, you see in Amazon or other online services is that you might like this too. But what this sort of underpinning some of the problematic issues comes from this unjust and really problematic hierarchical grouping of people based on the concept of race. That grouping of people based off race and or ethnicity is actually being sort of automated by the data and algorithms without the permission or consent or under nuanced understanding of people's own perceptions of identities of race and race ethnicities, therefore can potentially reinforce racism and reinscribe ideologies of differences of people based on the concept of race. Some examples here around predictive policing, thinking about things like who is likely, or data, AI telling us who is likely to be committing crime in the future based on its estimation and prediction of historical data, but without acknowledging the context that people of color and racialized people are often over-criminalized and over-surveilled in some of these historical contexts and pre-existing data. Therefore, if you make future predictions based on historical data, understanding a lot of the inequities that we see, of course, across society, that in order to, for example, predict criminal behaviors, that's going to reinforce and replicate some of those issues around systemic and institutional racism, such as we have seen that the London Met police gang matrix, which is now banned, that was used and has been identified, for example, by scholars like Patrick Williams, highlighting how people are being racially profiled and targeted based on the historical data. Second example, one of a recent report by the Alan Turing Institute highlighting the poorer accuracy and poorer performance of some of the medical devices used for diagnosis, particularly if it's used optical devices, so perform particularly poorly on darker skin color, similar to facial recognition technology. But if AI is to be turbocharged, as described by Keir Starmer as our Prime Minister, in health diagnosis and use in healthcare services, then it's going to reinforce, without understanding and acknowledging that there are issues and poorer performance, therefore a higher risk of misdiagnosis or underdiagnosis for racialized people. Another example here, similar to, especially in the use of ChatGPT or other large language models, bias algorithmic recommendations to determine, for example, sentencing that was used in the system in US, which is now also banned. Even if the information around race or ethnicity has been removed, there are other proxy data, for example, where someone lives, their income profile, what jobs that their parents do, where they live, postcodes, etc. That all still serve as a proxy towards someone's race or ethnicity, or being estimated by the AI and data, that being an explaining factor, without understanding that racialization and racism cuts through all the domains in people's lives, therefore affects people's life opportunities and what their lives would look like. There's also evidence suggesting stereotyping in large language models, and by ChatGPT, some very backward use of language, as well as stereotyping of people, and also sometimes incriminating hate towards people and reinforcing ideas of racism, transphobia, Islamophobia, and also other discrimination. There are things that we can do about it in addition to what Stuart and Steph highlighted earlier on too. In one of these projects that I've been involved in, we have been using co-design as a method to co-create principles and values that should drive the design of digital service to become more equitable. So we've created these 7 principles together with minoritized ethnic people and also involving third sector organizations, community organizations, data scientists, as well as other public organizations, in creating these sets of principles as an instructions of how to design digital services and public services more equitably. And the aim is then, therefore, to counter systemic inequities and racism in the access and the outcomes and experiences of digital services. We did 2 workshops in Birmingham and 2 workshops in Glasgow, then also fed into other work that creates some prototypes, but then this code of practice that this is now freely and publicly available, we hope organizations and also developers would adopt these principles. The 7 principles are just overview, but please do have a look, and the QR code is there that you can access the code of practice. There's the fairness, compassion, being user-centered, accessible, being transparent, private and secure, and trustworthy. One of the most striking things that we saw in the workshop is that we often, when we talk about digital services, issues of accessing digital devices or accessing to the internet is important. They're sometimes called digital poverty issue. But we also hear from people who are racialized saying that they don't want more access to these platforms or devices if they are racist. And I think that's an extremely important take-home point for us and also for people and organizations advocate for the rights of people to make sure that these technologies do not do more harm before we actually put these technologies in front of people. We need to get them right, to be fair, to be compassionate, to be user-centered, to be accessible, transparent, private and secure, and therefore people can trust it before we even get people to use it. And we're not taking the time to make sure that technologies are designed in this way. So please do refer to the code of practice. Really happy to chat more about it. A very quick overview of the FOAM project, Participatory Harm Auditing Workbenches and Methodologies, and I should acknowledge that Scottish AI Alliance are a partner for both of those projects, which is really great. This is led by University of Glasgow by Professor Simone Stumpf. I'm one of the co-investigators. What we're doing is flipping the power dynamic of who gets to decide what the AI is good for and when in what context it's good. So traditionally, that has normally remained in the power of people who are experts in AI to test their AI products to ensure that they are safe, to look at any harms and biases. There are metrics and technical tools that you can use. This project is really about developing new tools that are more inclusive so that people who are not AI experts, including members of the public, but also practitioners, for example, healthcare professionals, and also wider other policymakers or third sector officials that can carry out audits of harms and fairness of predictive and generative AI, so that these tools and methodologies will be created by the end of the project, but also in the meantime, we're also thinking about how to test this and create it together with some of our key partners, and very much happy to talk more about that if you want to be more involved in developing this tool. But hopefully, once we develop this tool, this will be available of use for wider organizations as well, in order to test and involve people who are not experts in AI in testing whether these the AI they're using or about to be introduced, whether they are fair or harmful or not. So we're doing some co-design workshop now. We'll develop these tools and we'll provide training and certification for any AI tools so that public sector, industry and third sector organizations can test the AI using our tools that developed together with non-AI experts and involve non-AI experts in auditing the harm and fairness of these AI tools. Thank you very much indeed.